was sitting across from me, chain-smoking one cigarette after another. That's what he always did when he was nervous. And right now, he had every reason to be. Our daughter, Lilly, had completely lost her mind, falling head over heels for some no-good layabout. It's like her brain stopped working overnight. She's dropping things left and right, forgetting about her studies entirely, and doesn't even want to work. She says, "I'm getting married soon. I'll have a baby, and we'll see what happens after that." Her father, Kent, immediately tried to straighten her out. He scolded her harshly, whipped her with a belt, even locked her in the barn overnight. But it was all useless. Lilly had fallen head over heels in love with a guy from the next street over. His name's Leo. I can't for the life of me figure out what she sees in him. He's plain-looking, scrawny, drinks like there's no tomorrow, and doesn't care much for work. All he does is sit around strumming his guitar and singing songs. Although I'll give him this, he's chatty and cheerful. Maybe that's why she fell for him. And our daughter, let me tell you, is a smart and beautiful girl. Straight A's on her school record, helps us, her parents, with everything around the house, and is into sports. She even planned to go to the city to study. But now, forget it. I'm in love. I can't help it. That's what she says. And to think we raised her, taught her, helped her with her homework, and all for what? Down the drain. She'll have kids with that good-for-nothing and stay stuck in this backwater. She'll end up raising livestock and toiling in the garden from morning till night. That's it. There's not much else to do around here anyway. Maria, where did we go wrong? My husband asked me. God only knows, I replied. Yeah, well, now all we can do is hope and pray. We sat in the kitchen for about an hour longer before my husband couldn't take it anymore and went out to look for our daughter. It was already 11 o'clock, and she still wasn't home. 15 minutes later, Lilly came through the door, her face streaked with tears. Kent and I exchanged a sorrowful glance, and in that moment, I cursed the day our daughter ever met that so-called idealist. Get to your room, and don't show your face until morning, Kent roared. But, Dad, Lilly sobbed. No, Dad, get out of my sight. Kent, what is wrong with you? I tried to stand up for our daughter. Why? Because she's dancing to his tune, that's why. Kent snipped. She doesn't want to study, and she doesn't want to go to the city. Do you know why? Because in the city you have to work. That guy barely scrapes by with odd jobs around here and lives off his parents, who'd want him there. And now he's filled our fool of a daughter's head with nonsense. And she's all too happy to stay here. You're right, I said, trying to reassure myself. Maybe things will work out. Maybe she'll change her mind. She'll stop loving him and come to her senses. She'll change her mind after the first kid. Sure, Kent replied bitterly. But by then, it'll be too late. Oh, what are we supposed to do? Who knows? Kent said, throwing up his hands. Let's just go to bed. Morning's wiser than evening, anyway. I got up before dawn, around 4 a.m., I think. When I stepped outside, I thought, the cow isn't going to milk herself. After tending to the cow, I had to make breakfast, feed the chickens, work in the garden, and clean the house. Day in, day out, the same routine. What a fool I am. I never had the chance to leave this place, and now Lilly. She has the chance, but, ugh. I fried some eggs, boiled the kettle, chopped some vegetables, and set a jar of milk on the table. Kent was wolfing it all down, but Lilly didn't seem in any hurry to eat. Ugh, Mom, are these rotten? She asked, wrinkling her nose as she held up a piece of fried egg on her fork. Don't you dare say that, I snapped. I just got them from the chicken coop. I'm not eating this. Fine, then at least drink some milk or eat the vegetables. Lilly poured herself a glass of milk and raised it to her lips, but before she could take the first sip, She clamped her hand over her mouth. She probably meant to run to the bathroom, but she didn't make it. She vomited right there on the floor. "I don't get it," Kent bellowed. "What's there not to get? The girl got food poisoning. It happens." I shot back. "I was throwing up this morning too." "From what?" "Well, the neighbors gave me some cheese. I shared it with Lilly. Like we don't have food of our own in this house." I quickly cleaned up, washed my hands, and retreated to my room. I didn't go to Lilly while Kent was still home, but the moment he stepped out the door to go to work, I hurried to my daughter. Without knocking, I opened the door to her room and asked directly, "Is there something you want to tell me?" She was sitting on the bed, staring blankly at a single spot. That kind of behavior was never a good sign. I knew my daughter well, and she always acted like this when she felt guilty. "Mom, I'm sorry," she whispered. Tears welled up in my eyes. Our pride, our hope, our beloved and only daughter, pregnant at 17. She had just graduated from school. And what will people say about her? Taking her for an abortion wasn't an option. I have no other children. Kent and I tried so many times to have more, but it was all in vain. And if we take this one away, what if she never has another? We're not going to be around forever. She has to have this baby, there's no other choice. After I came to this decision, I went back into my daughter's room. "Is it Leo's child?" I asked. "Whose else would it be?" she replied. "Well, yes, of course." "All right, I'll go talk to his parents. You stay here for now. If needed, we'll get both families together to discuss this." After I said that, Lilly seemed to come to life. "Mom, really?" she asked, her eyes lighting up. "Well, what else can we do? We'll have to marry you off," I replied. She immediately jumped off the bed and hugged me. There was no time to waste, so I got ready and headed to the next street. The door was opened almost immediately. It was Leo's mother, Mary. "Hi, Mary." "Oh, hi, Maria. Come in. I just put the kettle on." She greeted me warmly. "I'm here on business, actually." "What about Lilly?" "Don't worry," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "I've been keeping an eye on them." "Yeah, sure, you're keeping an eye on them," I said sarcastically. Her smile instantly vanished. She gave me a cautious look and asked, "What happened?" "What happened? We're going to have a grandchild. Or maybe a granddaughter. I don't know yet." "Well, now that's some news," she exclaimed, and then she hollered, "Leo, get over here, now." Leo got an earful from both his mother and me, but there was no way out of it. My daughter was pregnant, which meant we had to arrange a wedding to make everything proper. To everyone's surprise, Leo actually started working. And he worked diligently, no skipping shifts, no slacking off. Later, he would take Lilly and the baby under his wing. There was, after all, a glimmer of hope. No one had expected such responsibility from someone like Leo. Life settled into a routine as we waited for the baby's arrival. Lilly was over the moon with excitement. Our local medic confirmed her pregnancy, and we all kept guessing. Would it be a boy or a girl? We held the wedding when Lily's belly was already quite noticeable. We couldn't find a dress that fit, so we had one custom made. It was loud, lively, and packed with people. A real celebration. But, as they say, there's always a fly in the ointment. My grandmother, Lily's great-grandmother, came to the wedding, but she looked somber. While everyone else was laughing, chatting, and enjoying themselves, she sat there staring off into space, as if lost in her own thoughts. You couldn't get a single word out of her. "Grandma, why are you sitting there like a wet blanket?" I asked her. "Lily's not doing well," she replied. "What do you mean? Look at her. She's so happy. I can see that, but that's not what I mean. She's in trouble." Big trouble. What are you saying, Grandma? Take her to a doctor. Something's not right with her belly. Are you serious? She's pregnant. No, Maria, it's not pregnancy. I'd stake my life on it. God help us. Grandma, I said, waving her off. Take her to a doctor, you hear me, before it's too late. I realized there was no point in arguing with her, so I agreed. That was the end of our conversation. Lily's belly grew not by the day, but by the hour. And as it grew, her health steadily worsened. She spent most of her time lying down, lost her appetite, and fainted often. Leo's family was constantly fussing over her, and we visited as much as we could, bringing food, clothes, and vitamins. But none of it helped. She just kept getting worse. I still remember that evening. Mary came running to me, trembling all over, her face as pale as a sheet. I could see she wanted to say something but couldn't get the words out. Mary, what's wrong? There's trouble, she stammered. Spit it out. Your daughter hasn't eaten since last night. She fainted, and by evening, her belly started hurting. Poor thing can't bend or straighten up. She's in agony. When I heard that, I immediately sat down on the bench, feeling overwhelmed. Mary stayed with me until late at night. Kent, the parasite, had conveniently gone to visit his brother in the next village. So, Mary and I sat there together until it got dark. I ended up drinking 50 grams of herbal tincture and went to bed, thinking I'd sleep through until morning. But that wasn't the case. I woke up in the middle of the night and heard the floorboards creaking in the house. I thought, Kent must be back. So I called out, Kent, is that you? No response. A few seconds passed, and then I heard the creaking again. I carefully picked up a heavy vase from the table and headed straight toward the sound. But the vase turned out to be unnecessary. There was no one in the room. Yet the floorboards were shifting as if someone was walking on them. I let out a scream and, in nothing but my nightgown, jumped out the window. I locked myself in the summer kitchen and sat there, waiting for my husband to come home. Meanwhile, strange things started happening in the house. From the window, I could see the light in our bedroom flickering, turning on and off by itself. But how could it do that on its own? It was terrifying. What on earth was going on? I didn't close my eyes all night. I only worked up the courage to leave my refuge when everything finally went quiet by morning. The most horrifying part was finding the large wooden cross that used to hang above the door lying on the floor. It was right at the threshold. And the worst part? It had been nailed to the door frame. I quickly cleaned everything up and ran to the church to see the priest. He gave me holy water and instructed me to pray at home every day and place candles in each corner of the house. He also promised to visit in a few days. When I asked him what was happening, he said, "This is a bad omen, but if you pray, the misfortune will leave your home. Everything will be fine." That's exactly what I did. I didn't say a word to my husband. He doesn't believe in God or the devil. Silently, I put all the icons back in their places, rehung the cross, and then carried out all the priest's instructions. When Kent came home from work, he said that we'd go to the hospital to see our daughter the next day. I agreed. There's no direct way to contact the hospital. We could call from the payphone, of course, but it's better to go in person. That way, it's more reliable. Around noon, we headed to the regional center with a neighbor. He's a kind man. He let us into his car and drove us to the hospital. I already had a bad feeling, but once we reached the reception area, the weight in my chest grew unbearable. "Hello, we're here to see Lily," I said to the young nurse. She widened her eyes and mumbled, "Lily? Just a moment. Room 5. She's by the window." My husband and I exchanged a glance. Kent froze, his face pale with dread. "I have a bad feeling," he muttered. "Quiet now. No need to start panicking yet," Kent snapped back. cutting him off. When we entered the room, we found Lilly lying on the bed, facing the wall. I sat down beside her and gently touched her shoulder. "Mom, I'm not asleep," she said quietly. "Hello, my sweet girl. If you're not sleeping, why didn't you come to greet us?" I asked softly. She stayed silent and buried her face in the pillow. "Lilly, why aren't you saying anything? We're your parents, not strangers," said an elderly woman from the neighboring bed. "What do you mean?" Kent asked, startled. "Well, they found a tumor," the old woman said sadly. "They won't operate." I don't remember much of what happened after that. My husband took a long time speaking with the attending physician, and I was on the verge of a breakdown. Eventually, the young nurse from earlier came running in with the doctor and gave me an injection. Whatever it was, it had a strong effect on me. I drifted into a foggy state, and when we got back home, I collapsed onto the bed and fell asleep immediately. We brought Lilly home a few days after the hospital visit. I couldn't wrap my head around it. There was no baby in her belly, just a massive tumor that couldn't be removed. Her days were numbered, and the doctors predicted she had only a month and a half, maybe 2, left to live. The house was no longer filled with laughter or joy. My husband and I tried to mentally prepare ourselves for the inevitable, while Lilly didn't even cling to hope. She was preparing herself to die. One day, I was in the kitchen making lunch when I heard her shouting, "Mom! Mom!" she cried desperately. I feared the worst and rushed to her room. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked. "There's someone standing in the yard. Please, look." I went outside immediately but found no one. "Sweetheart, you must have been mistaken," I said. "But someone was there," she insisted. "Well, maybe they were and then left," I replied. The next morning, my husband and I were sitting at the table when we both jumped up, startled by Lily's scream. She was shrieking so loudly it felt like the windows might shatter. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Kent asked, alarmed. "Dad, it's Grandma. She's here," Lilly cried. "What Grandma? She's been gone for 10 years.
Kent replied, stunned.
"Dad, she's in the closet." Lilly sobbed hysterically, pointing at the wardrobe.
Kent silently walked over and pulled the closet door open. Inside, there was no one. Everything was in its place. "Go to sleep, sweetheart. Your mom and I will call the doctor for you," Kent said in a calm voice, though the look in his eyes betrayed sheer terror.
From that day on, the nurse began visiting our home regularly. But along with her, something else started happening. Our deceased relatives and townsfolk began appearing to Lilly. Each day, they seemed to draw closer. By the final week, they were even sitting on her bed. I knew our little girl didn't have much time left. Outside, the wind howled and a blizzard raged. "Maria, how much longer do you think she has?" Kent asked. "I don't even want to think about it. Let's go to bed," I replied. "Mama, Papa?" Lily's weak voice called out to us. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked. "They're back again," she whispered fearfully. Kent and I both got out of bed at the same time and headed to Lily's room. Of course, there was no one there. "Sweetheart, what are you talking about? There's no one here. It's just the 3 of us," I said. "No, Mom," she whispered faintly. "They're telling me I have to go with them." Kent and I exchanged a frightened look, and in that moment, we both realized that by tomorrow, we would be alone in this house. "Mom, Dad, Grandma put her hand on my belly," Lilly barely managed to whisper with trembling lips. I lost all sense of myself and ran to get help. But by the time I returned, my little girl was gone. Kent was sitting on the floor, his head resting on the edge of the bed, inconsolable. And me, I was just a shell of a person. I spent my days lying there, staring blankly at the ceiling. Kent was neither alive nor dead. He moved through the house like a shadow, a hollow version of himself. 9 days later, he started drinking again. I didn't recognize the man I once knew. I had thought that at least we'd get through this together, but I was wrong. As the saying goes, when trouble comes, it opens the floodgates. A month and a half later, my husband completely broke down. He started drinking himself into a stupor, even to the point of delirium tremens. I didn't scold him, I understood. He wasn't as strong as I was. Despite being a man, he couldn't bear the weight of the tragedy that had fallen on us. I visited my daughter's grave, tended to the livestock, and kept myself busy around the house. Life, in its own way, started to settle back into a routine. But the house no longer felt like a home, and looking at my husband was unbearable. He had wasted away, grown gaunt, and aged 10 years in what felt like no time. Yet the bottle never left his side. He drank more heavily than ever. That's when I realized I had to do something. I went to see our village healer, but she wouldn't even let me through the door. "Go back," she said. "There's nothing you can do here." I spat in her direction and walked home. What's her problem with me? I can't for the life of me figure it out. One unremarkable morning, I got up at 5 a.m., as usual, to milk the cow. The moment I swung my legs off the bed, I heard a strange sound. It turned out the icon from the red corner had fallen to the floor. At first, I was scared and thought about running to the healer. But then I calmed myself down. It fell, so what? Must have been a draft or the wind. Anything could have caused it. I thought. I managed to settle down, but a seed of doubt had already been planted. I traveled to the neighboring village to see Kent's relatives. They managed to get me some blessed water. I started adding it to his tea every time, as they promised it would help cure his drinking. I also prayed every morning and evening without fail. And it seemed to work. Kent even started drinking less. One evening, I went to bed earlier than usual. I was completely exhausted from the day's work. I fell asleep like a rock. But suddenly, in my dream, Lilly appeared before me. "Mom!" she called out, reaching her hands toward me. "Lilly, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be dead." "I've come for Dad," she said softly. "Get out of here. Go to hell." I screamed at her, and then her face began to change. I could barely recognize my daughter anymore. Her eyes turned blood red. Her mouth twisted into a predatory grin, and the skin around her eyes darkened. "I'll take him anyway," she said in a voice that wasn't her own. I screamed. The window frame banged open and shut from the wind, and I ran frantically around the room. What kind of devilry is this? In terror, I rushed to Kent. He was sleeping peacefully, softly snoring in his bed. What a nightmare to have, I thought to myself. The next few days were quiet, no nightmares, no visions. I kept myself busy with the household chores and watched over my husband. He was drinking less now, only a couple of times a week, which was a relief compared to his daily binges before. By the end of the week, though, he got completely drunk again. When I found him passed out in the living room, I decided not to wake him. Let him sleep it off. I went to bed myself closer to 2 in the morning. I tossed and turned for a long time, but eventually, sleep overcame me. I don't know how much time had passed, but suddenly I felt something cold touch my forehead. I opened my eyes and was struck speechless with terror. Sitting before me was my daughter. She looked just as she had when she was alive, but her unnaturally pale skin made it clear she was not among the living. "What do you want?" I managed to ask. "I've come for Dad," she whispered. "For Dad? What do you mean, for Dad? Get out of here. Go to hell. Leave. Do you hear me?" I screamed. I screamed uncontrollably, completely out of my mind. She stood silently, then vanished as if she had never been there. And that's when the horrifying realization struck me. This wasn't a dream.
Gent.
I shouted. Silence.
Gent.
I called again, panic rising. Silence again. My legs felt like jelly as I got out of bed and made my way to the living room. There was my husband, lying on the couch. I noticed a small trace of white foam at the corners of his mouth. With trembling hands, I reached for his neck to feel for a pulse. There was none. His skin was ice cold. Lilly had taken him. That's how it works. They come before death.